Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at someone whose work I think can really help us understand the forces that shape our world and our relationship.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because a lot of the terms that you hear today, like covert contracts or the whole red pill philosophy, these ideas actually echo many of the themes that were explored by thinkers like Frantz Fanon.
Fanon. Okay, so to be honest, I'm not super familiar with his work. Could you give us a quick rundown? Like, who was he and why is he relevant to what we're talking about today? Especially for the guys listening who are trying to navigate marriage and relationships.
Yeah, so Frantz Fanon was a fascinating figure. He was born in Martinique in 1925, so he experienced colonialism firsthand. But he wasn't just a philosopher or a political activist. He was also a psychiatrist.
A psychiatrist, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and this is key to understanding his perspective because he saw the impact of colonialism not just on a political or economic level, but on a psychological level.
So how does that connect to marriage and relationships?
Well, one of his most famous books is called Black Skin, White Masks. And in it, he talks about this concept of colonial neurosis.
Colonial neurosis. I'm not familiar with that.
Basically, it's this feeling of inferiority that gets instilled in the colonized people. They start to believe that their culture, their language, even their very being, is somehow less than the colonizers.
So you're saying there's a parallel between feeling colonized and the way some men feel marginalized or even demonized in today's society.
It's a provocative comparison, right? Like, think about what Fanon observed in Algeria, where he worked. The French actively suppressed Algerian culture. Their language, their clothing, their social custom, they replaced it with French ways of being.
You're saying that something similar might be happening today with traditional masculinity, that it's being suppressed or replaced.
That's the question Fanon's work prompts us to consider.
Right. Are certain expressions of masculinity being deemed unacceptable? Are men feeling pressure to conform to new norms that don't resonate with their understanding of themselves? That's heavy stuff. And it does kind of resonate with some of the discussions I've seen online, especially in red pill community. There's definitely this sense that men are being told to apologize for being men.
Yeah, and this ties directly into Fanon's concept of cultural hegemony. He observed how the dominant culture's values become the default, the right way of thinking and being. And anyone who doesn't conform can feel like an outsider.
So how does that relate to the idea of feminist capture of institutions that we hear so much about?
Let's take the legal system, for example. Fanon saw how in Algeria, the legal framework was designed to favor the French colonizer. It was their laws, their courts, their system of justice that prevailed. Fast forward to today, and some men feel that family courts, for instance, are similarly skewed against them.
You're saying that just like the Algerians were subject to a legal system that wasn't designed for them, some men feel like the institutions that govern their lives no longer represent their interests.
It's a powerful parallel, right? And it goes beyond just the legal system. It extends to media portrayals of men, to educational curricula, to social norms, all the ways in which dominant values and narratives are shaped and reinforced.
It's like Fanon is giving us a whole new lens to look at these issues, to understand the deeper forces at play.
Exactly. And remember, Fanon was writing in a specific historical context, but his insights on power, identity, and the struggle for self-determination, they have this timeless quality to them.
This is fascinating. I'm already starting to see how Fanon's work could help make sense of some of the frustration and confusion that I hear from men in the red pill community.
That's what's so powerful about Fanon's work. He offers us this framework for understanding not just the political realities of oppression, but also the psychological impact.
Okay, now I'm really hooked. Tell me more about this idea of liberation. How does Fanon see it, and how does it apply to the issues we're discussing?
For Fanon, liberation wasn't just about achieving political independence or anything like that. It was about dismantling the internal structures of oppression. What he called decolonizing the mind.
Colonizing the mind. Okay, that's a powerful phrase. What does it actually mean, though? Especially for the guys listening who are trying to navigate marriage and relationships in today's world.
Imagine being told your entire life that your culture, your way of being is inferior, that you need to be civilized, modernized, essentially molded into something different. Over time, you start to internalize these messages. You might even begin to see yourself through the lens of the colonizer, questioning your own worth and validity.
It's not just about external forces controlling you. It's about those forces shaping how you see yourself, how you think.
Precisely. And Fanon argued that true liberation begins with recognizing and rejecting those internalized messages. It's about reclaiming your own narrative, your own sense of self, free from the distortions of the colonizer's gaze.
I can see how this connects to the red pill idea of taking the red pill.
Right.
Waking up to the ways in which society's programming might be influencing you, even if you're not consciously aware of it.
It's a striking parallel, isn't it? And it raises some important questions for men today. What are the messages they've internalized about masculinity, about relationships, about their roles in society? And how might those messages be impacting their lives, their marriages, their sense of self?
That's a lot to unpack. Where do you even begin to decolonize your mind? Sounds like a pretty daunting task.
Fanon believed that critical self-reflection is key. It's about questioning the assumptions you've been taught, examining the sources of those assumptions, and asking yourself if they truly serve you.
So it's about challenging those unspoken covert contracts we talked about earlier, those expectations that might be holding men back in their relationships and in their lives.
Exactly. It's about recognizing those patterns, understanding where they came from, and then choosing whether to continue upholding them or to rewrite the script.
Okay, so let's say a guy listening to this realizes, hey, maybe I have internalized some messages about what it means to be a man or a husband that aren't actually working for me. What's the next step? What does it look like to actually decolonize those beliefs?
You know, Fanon didn't offer a step-by-step guide, but his work emphasizes the importance of both individual and collective action. On an individual level, it's about engaging in deep introspection, exploring your values, and defining what masculinity means to you on your own terms.
That makes sense. But what about the collective action part? How does that fit in?
Well, Fanon recognized that dismantling oppressive systems requires collective effort. Think about the Algerian struggle for independence. It wasn't just about individuals changing their mind. It was about people coming together to challenge the colonial power structures.
So for men today, this could mean finding communities where they can connect with others who are also questioning the status quo. Who are also trying to decolonize their own thinking about masculinity and relationship.
Precisely. It's about sharing experiences, supporting each other, and working together to create a more equitable and fulfilling reality.
That makes me think of the Red Pill community itself. In a way, it's a form of collective action, right? Men coming together to challenge dominant narratives and support each other in navigating the challenges of modern masculinity.
It certainly has that element to it, but it's important to remember that Fanon cautioned against simply replacing one form of oppression with another. He believed that true liberation meant creating a society where all individuals, regardless of gender, race, or any other social category, had the opportunity to define their own identities and destinies, free from the constraints of predetermined roles or hierarchies.
It's a powerful vision, but how do we get there? Especially when it comes to these deeply ingrained ideas about gender roles and expectations.
Fanon's work suggests that it starts with awareness, with recognizing the ways in which power operates, both on a societal and individual level. It's about questioning the narratives we've been told, challenging the covert contracts that limit our potential, and imagining new possibilities for ourselves and for our relationships.
So it's about becoming more conscious, more deliberate in how we approach these issues. It's about making choices that align with our own values rather than just blindly following the script that's been handed to us.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming our agency, both individually and collectively. And Fanon believed that this was not just possible, but absolutely essential for creating a more just and fulfilling world.
Okay, so we've talked about decolonizing the mind, challenging those internalized messages, and taking collective action. But there's another aspect of Fanon's work that I think is really relevant to the listener's interest in understanding how power dynamics play out, and that's his concept of cultural.
You're right, and it's a particularly timely topic given the listener's concern about feminist capture of institutions. Remember, Fanon witnessed firsthand how French colonizers appropriated aspects of Algerian culture, their clothing, their music, even their language, but stripped them of their original meaning and used them to further their own agenda.
So it wasn't about genuine appreciation or cultural exchange. It was about power and control.
Exactly. And I think that's a crucial distinction to keep in mind when we talk about cultural appropriation today. It's not always a clear-cut issue. Sometimes it can be a form of genuine respect and appreciation, but other times it can be a way of perpetuating power imbalances and silencing marginalized voices.
And you're suggesting that this dynamic might be playing out in the context of what the listener is calling feminist capture.
It's a question worth exploring. Think about the ways in which certain feminist ideas or slogans have been adopted by mainstream culture, sometimes in ways that seem to reinforce existing power structures rather than challenge them.
So it's like those ideas are being co-opted, stripped of their original radical potential, and used to serve a different purpose.
It's a possibility, and one that Fanon's work encourages us to consider. He reminds us to be critical, to look beyond the surface, and to ask who benefits from the way certain ideas are being used.
This is all really thought-provoking. I'm starting to see how Fanon's work can offer a whole new perspective on these issues, a way to understand the deeper power dynamics at play.
That's the power of Fanon. He challenges us to question our assumptions, to look at the world with fresh eyes, and to see the possibilities for transformation both within ourselves and in the larger structures that shape our lives.
Okay, this has been an incredible deep dive so far. We've explored Fanon's ideas about colonial neurosis, cultural hegemony, decolonizing the mind, and even touched on cultural appropriation. But there's one more piece of the puzzle that I think is crucial for the listener who's trying to understand the dynamics within their own marriage. Fanon's insights on violence.
That's right. And this is where Fanon's work gets particularly complex and controversial. He argued that in the context of colonialism, violence could sometimes be a necessary tool for liberation.
Hold on, violence? That seems pretty extreme. How does that relate to what we're talking about here, especially within the context of marriage?
Fanon wasn't advocating for mindless violence or aggression. He was talking about a very specific type of violence, a strategic targeted response to systemic oppression.
Okay, but how does that translate to the listener situation? I mean, we're not talking about armed revolution here.
You're right. But remember, Fanon was writing from his experience of the Algerian War of Independence. What's important for the listener is not the literal act of violence, but the underlying principle. The need to disrupt oppressive structures to break free from the cycle of domination and submission.
So it's more about a metaphorical violence, a forceful rejection of the covert contracts that are causing harm within a relationship.
That's one way to interpret it. It's about recognizing those patterns of inequality, those unspoken agreements that keep one person in a position of power over the other, and refusing to play by those rules anymore.
So instead of resorting to physical or verbal aggression, it's about setting boundaries, asserting your needs, and refusing to be complicit in your own oppression.
Exactly. It's about taking a stand, even if it means disrupting the status quo, even if it means challenging the way things have always been done.
This is really powerful stuff. I can see how this idea could be both liberating and terrifying, especially for someone who's been living under a certain set of rules for a long time.
It's definitely not an easy path, but Fanon believed that true liberation often requires a willingness to shake things up, to break free from the comfortable confines of the familiar, and to embrace the unknown.
So for the guy listening who's feeling trapped in a covert contract within his marriage, Fanon's message is not about resorting to violence, but about finding the courage to disrupt those patterns, to assert his own needs and desires, and to create a more equitable dynamic.
That's a nuanced way to put it. And it highlights the importance of understanding Fanon's ideas in their full context, recognizing that his work was born out of a very specific historical and political struggle. But even though the listener's situation is vastly different, Fanon's insights on power, oppression, and liberation can still offer valuable tools for reflection and action.
I can definitely see that. And I think this is where we need to bring in another crucial aspect of Fanon's work. His understanding of the psychological impact of oppression. Remember, he wasn't just a philosopher or a political theorist. He was a psychiatrist who saw firsthand how colonialism damaged not just individuals, but entire societies, creating deep psychological wounds that needed to be addressed.
You're right. And this psychological dimension is particularly relevant to the listener who's trying to understand the dynamics within his marriage, because often the most insidious forms of oppression are the ones that operate on an unconscious level, shaping our beliefs, our behaviors, and our sense of self without us even realizing it.
So it's not just about changing the external circumstance, it's about healing those internal wounds, those ingrained patterns of thinking that keep us trapped in unhealthy dynamics.
Exactly. And this is where Fanon's work intersects with the red pill philosophy in a really interesting way. Both emphasize the importance of waking up to the ways in which we've been programmed by societal norms, and both advocate for a process of self-discovery and transformation.
So it's like both are saying, don't just accept the default setting, question everything, explore your own needs and desires, and create a life that's authentically yours.
That's a powerful way to put it, and I think that's a message that resonates deeply with a lot of men today, regardless of their specific circumstance. Because ultimately, Fanon's work is about the human struggle for freedom, for dignity, and for the right to define our own lives on our own terms.
This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. I'm already starting to see Fanon's work in a whole new light. But before we wrap up, I want to make sure we circle back to one of the listeners' initial questions. How can men decolonize themselves from harmful societal messages, particularly those that might be impacting their relationship? What practical steps can they take?
That's a great question, and it's one that we can't fully answer in the remaining time we have. But I think Fanon would offer a few key pieces of advice. First, he'd encourage deep self-reflection. Take the time to examine your beliefs about masculinity, about relationships, about your role in society. Where do those beliefs come from? Do they truly serve you, or are they holding you back?
So it's about becoming more aware of the covert contracts that might be operating in your life, those unspoken agreements that are shaping your behavior and your relationship.
Exactly. Once you become aware of those patterns, you can start to challenge them. You can begin to assert your own needs, to set boundaries, and to create a more equitable dynamic.
Yeah. And what about the collective action piece? We talked about the importance of finding communities where men can connect connect and support each other. Any specific suggestions for the listener?
Well, the Red Pill community itself can be a valuable resource. It's a space where men are already engaging in these conversations, sharing their experiences, and challenging dominant narrative. But it's also important to remember that true liberation requires engaging with a diversity of perspectives. Don't limit yourself to one echo chamber. Seek out different viewpoints, challenge your own assumptions, and be open to learning and growing.
That's great advice. And it really speaks to the heart of Fanon's message. To decolonize the mind is to embrace critical thinking, to question everything, and to be open to new possibilities.
Absolutely. And I think that's a powerful message for all of us, regardless of our gender, our background, or our beliefs.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive into the work of Frantz Fanon. I'm so grateful for your insights and expertise. I have a feeling we've only just scratched the surface of this topic.
It's been a pleasure. And you're right, there's so much more to explore in Fanon's work. It's a journey of discovery that can be both challenging and incredibly rewarding.
And for the listener who's eager to continue that journey, Fanon's groundbreaking book, Black Skin, White Masks, is available on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books.
It's a must-read for anyone who wants to understand the complexities of power identity and the ongoing struggle for liberation in our modern world.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Frantz Fanon. We hope you'll join us next time as we continue to explore the ideas that shape our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. It's really fascinating how Fanon was able to connect those personal psychological experiences with those larger societal structures.
Yeah, and that's where his background as a psychiatrist really shines through. He understood that colonialism wasn't just a political or economic system, it was a psychological one as well. It impacted people's minds, their sense of self, their relationships with others.
So how did he see those psychological wounds manifesting?
He observed a whole range of symptoms, things like feelings of inferiority, self-hatred, this desire to mimic the colonizer, to adopt their language, their culture, their values, even if it meant rejecting their own heritage.
It's like they were trying to become what they thought they were supposed to be, even if it went against their own nature.
Exactly. And Fanon saw how this internalized oppression could lead to violence, both inward and outward.
That makes sense. It's like if you believe you're inherently inferior, you might start to act in ways that confirm that belief.
Right. And Fanon argued that traditional Western psychiatry wasn't equipped to deal with this kind of trauma. He believed true healing required a complete dismantling of the colonial mindset, a reclaiming of one's own identity and culture, and a rebuilding of a sense of self-worth that had been systematically eroded.
This really resonates with what we were discussing earlier about red pill philosophy and that idea of waking up to the ways in which societal programming might be influencing you. It's about recognizing those internalized messages, those covert contracts, and then questioning their validity.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not an easy process. It requires real honesty, self-awareness, and a willingness to confront some uncomfortable truths about yourself and the world around you.
But Fanon believed it was essential for genuine liberation.
He did.
So for the listener who's trying to apply these ideas to their own life, their own marriage, where do they begin? What does it look like to actually decolonize your mind within the context of a relationship?
Fanon would probably say the first step is awareness. Just pay attention to the dynamics within your relationship. Are there unspoken expectations, power imbalances, or patterns of behavior that are causing you or your partner harm?
And recognizing those patterns is just the beginning.
Of course. What comes next is the willingness to challenge those patterns. This might mean setting boundaries, communicating your needs more assertively, or even renegotiating the covert contracts that have been operating within the relationship.
So it's not about blaming your partner or trying to control them.
No, not at all.
It's about taking responsibility for your own role in the dynamic and working together to create a more equitable relationship.
That's a really important point, and it speaks to Fanon's belief in the power of dialogue and collaboration. He didn't see decolonization as a one-sided process. It was about both parties coming together to recognize the imbalances and work towards a more just and fulfilling relationship.
Which I think brings us back to Fanon's emphasis on both individual and collective action, right? Like it's not enough to just change your own thinking. You also need to engage with the larger systems that are perpetuating these harmful dynamics.
Exactly. And for the listener who's concerned about things like the feminist capture of institutions, this might mean engaging in critical dialogue, advocating for policy changes, or even supporting organizations that are working to create a more equitable society for everyone.
It's like those Russian nesting dolls, right? One inside the other.
Yeah, kind of. You've got the individual, then the relationship, then the larger societal structures, and they all influence each other.
So it's recognizing that personal transformation is intertwined with social transformation. We can't truly decolonize our minds without also addressing the systemic issues that are contributing to these problems.
I think that's a really powerful insight, and one that lies at the heart of the Fanon's work. He saw the struggle for liberation as this multifaceted process involving individual healing, collective action, and a radical restructuring of power.
And I think that's a message that's incredibly relevant today, especially for men who are feeling lost, frustrated, or just disillusioned with the current state of affairs. Fanon offers a framework for understanding these challenges, for reclaiming agents, and for creating a more just and fulfilling world, not just for themselves, but for everyone.
Couldn't agree more. And if you're feeling inspired to explore these ideas further, I highly recommend diving into Fanon's own words. His book, Black Skin, White Masks, is a challenging read, but it's incredibly insightful and thought-provoking.
Yeah, absolutely. It's available on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books, and it's well worth the effort.
It is.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive into the world of Frantz Fanon. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and helping us unpack these complex and timely issues.
It's been a pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity to engage in this important conversation.
And to all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you'll continue to explore these ideas and to find ways to apply them to your own lives and relationships. And we'll see you next time for another deep dive into the ideas that shape our world.